What's up, y'all? It's your Higher Ed Hot Seat team out here on episode 4. Today, we're going to get into our special guest. We'll go into their journey in higher ed and what that was like. And also, towards the end of the podcast, we'll talk a little bit about financial aid and what that kind of journey is like for students. So, for no further ado, we'll do some introductions. My name is Yasmin. I'm a fourth year graduating student. And a fun fact about me is I have a really bad addiction to shoes. Probably have like 40, 50 different pairs of shoes. So, yeah, I have an addiction.
Hi everyone, my name is Brittany. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm a second-year grad student studying public health, and a little fun fact about me is that I study abroad in Paris.
I did not know that. Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. I'm a fourth year graduating student. A fun fact about me is that I went on a trip to Mexico once, and when I came back, all my fish died.
Oh no. Hey everybody, my name is Noé. I work at EOP, and the furthest I've ever traveled away from home is Thailand.
Yeah, y'all, and let's give a good welcome to our special guest, Kim.
Hey everyone, my name is Kim. I'm from Waihee, Maui, Hawaii. And a fun fact about me is that I love running, and I'm currently trying to hit 1,000 miles in 2021. So we'll see how that goes.
Yo, that's lit. I hate running, so props to you, Kim. Yeah, so now we're gonna go into the introduction a little bit. Kim, if you want to give, I know you said your hometown already and your fun fact, but also what you majored in college, and also your current higher ed position.
Yeah, so in undergrad, I was an English lit major, and I'm currently going to graduate school for the Master's in Education in Equity and Social Justice here at SF State. And I currently work as an academic advisor with the EOPP program.
Cool. And now let's get into a little bit about your college story and also what it was like moving away from home. We've both had a little bit of conversation about, your journey and what that kind of looked like. And that's really why I wanted you to be on the podcast and, share your story, because I think it's something that's really unique. And I wanted to just kind of, unpack that a little bit. And so first, I guess let's talk about where did you go to school for your bachelor's and then later on for your master's?
For sure. So I was late in applying to universities, to be honest, but I did go to the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So it was really great to go there for like in-state tuition. I came from a single parent home, first generation. So it was kind of nice to still be just like an island away. So yeah, I went to UH Manoa for my undergraduate, and I'm currently going to SF State for my master's.
How did you choose both of those colleges?
Yeah, so like UH Manoa, again, it was just kind of nice to be pretty close to home, and cost was always a factor. It was also really nice. I have a twin sister, so we moved at the same time. We were on the same island, so we got to live together. So that was like extra years that I got to be near her, which was pretty cool and a really great experience that I don't think a lot of siblings have. And for my master's, that took a while. I had like this grand plan to immediately go into my master's after graduating with my bachelor's, but that doesn't always happen. And I think it's great to take your time trying to find the right program. I had applied to like graduate programs at UH Manoa. I had gotten into one at Mills when I first got to the Bay Area, but none of them were really the right fit. And then one of my coworkers in financial aid had mentioned the equity and social justice concentration here at SF State, and it fit perfectly with like what I'm doing as an academic advisor with EOP. So I just kind of found that one, and it's been like a great experience to learn a lot about it in theory in class and be able to apply it to my work. Yeah.
Yo, did y'all know that Kim was a twin? I did not know that. That is crazy. No, wait, did you know that?
There's a couple twins at EOP I don't know about. I think Steph's a twin too, and Mel. I forgot who else, but yeah, I did know that, but it's not on my list of things to say when introducing. She's a twin.
No, that's great. That's really cool. Okay, so also I'm getting into like the nitty gritty of it. We talked a little bit last week about what it was like for students to be moving away from home, being away from their parents, their family, and just adjusting to adult life and adulting. So for you, you had a huge move for your master's, right? Or kind of break us down on the timeline a little bit about what it was like from moving from Hawaii all the way out here.
Yeah, so I didn't move out here specifically for my master's. I actually moved out here on a whim. Um, I came to visit a friend who was living in Oakland at the time in like October, decided I really love the Bay Area and I'm going to move here. November, I gave my 2 weeks at the job that I was working at in Hawaii. And December, at the end of 2015, I moved up here and I had no intention or no prospects of like graduate school or like even a job up here. I just kind of did the thing. I don't know if I would ever suggest to anyone to do that. It was a really unique experience. I think it was one that really helped me grow as a person, though. So, if you're up for that adventure and if you're kind of open to doing whatever it takes to really live a life that you've chosen, I would say go for it. But yeah, that was kind of my really rushed timeline of moving to the Bay Area. And getting into graduate school, once I moved up here, I did find positions in higher education. So I worked at UCSF for a little while. I worked at Mills. I worked at a really small college called CIIS. And then I found my place at SF State. And then I found my master's program here. So it's been a wild ride since moving to the Bay Area. And it's only been about 5 years. So yeah.
Dang, Kim, I wouldn't call it a whim. That sounds like destiny, yo. That sounds like you just fulfilled your destiny. I myself am someone who does that too. Like, you know what? I quit my job without having, any kind of backup, but I just knew it was the right thing to do. But long story.
Yeah, but like when I first moved up here, it was also the first time that I was going to be so far away from my family. So like that first year, I had already built such a life back home in Hawaii. Like I had done my undergrad there. I grew up there. My family was there. I lived with my sister for an extra, 4 years during undergrad. So being away from my family, that was such a huge change for me. And my family's very family oriented. We're very close. My sister and I are very close. So that was the first time after like 23 years from like the womb to Oahu being together that we were going to be separated. And I think initially you're just going off of this adrenaline rush of like, I'm moving, I'm like starting this new chapter in my life. But I'm not gonna lie, that first year was really hard. It was a lot of thinking, did I make the wrong move for myself? Should I go back home? Because I'd had other friends who moved to the mainland who ended up coming back because things didn't work out. And I was like, well, am I going to be one of those people? But one of my friends from Hawaii, the one who I came to visit in the Bay earlier, he was like, you're either going to decide that you're going to make it here or you're not. And he's like, and what's the worst thing? You're going to go back home, right? To family, to friends, to all of that. So you could just try it out here and see what happens. And honestly, it's been really great. I've had a lot of opportunities out here, and being out here has helped me grow as a person in ways that I don't think I would have just staying kind of in my comfort zone back in like this little Hawaii bubble. So yeah, it definitely took some adjusting, culture shock for sure, but I wouldn't trade having moved up here to staying back there for anything.
Was it super hard for your parents when you kind of told them like I'm gonna uproot and move somewhere else?
Yeah. So yeah, it's me, my mom, and my twin sister, and we like grew up with my grandparents. So I think it was especially hard for like my grandma, who I'm super close with, and my mom, who I'm super close with. I'd been talking about moving for quite a while, like here and there, just like mentioning it. And initially, my mom was very against it because I think she wanted to keep my sister and I very close. But when I did finally make that decision, like, hey, I'm going to move, this is it, she kind of just accepted it. Like, you're an adult now, you've graduated college, you're going to make these decisions on your own, which was really great because I feel like we kind of butted heads for the first couple of years where I was suggesting it. And then she finally came to terms with like, Kim's going to do this regardless of what I say. So at first it was really difficult. Yeah. There was a lot of crying on the day that I left. And I, still go home to visit a lot. But yeah, it was difficult the first, I would say year, maybe a couple years to be away from home. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also too, what was it like? Because last week we talked about moving away from home and also how that took a toll financially on a lot of us and as well as a lot of students. It takes because you're uprooting your whole life. You probably haven't been saving because you're in undergrad and in
Yeah.
undergrad people blow the money like crazy because they don't understand how much money it takes to go to school, like tuition, and then to live, and you know what I'm saying. And then so right from undergrad, and then you're moving to California.
Mhm.
What was that kind of like financially?
Yeah, so I had taken about a year after I graduated undergrad before I made the move. So I did have like a little saved up, but definitely not enough to have like not enough if someone had actually planned this, right? So I kind of did this again on a whim. I didn't have a lot of savings, and I also did not really know where I was going to live until like a week before I moved up here. So definitely plan, everybody. But yeah, so as far as the financial aspect, that was really difficult because I needed to pay for this rent that, I had no other income coming in at the time. I had barely enough savings. I was moving a lot of, like my stuff from Hawaii, which if you're shipping something from Hawaii is so much more expensive than if you could just like drive it in a U-Haul on the continental United States. So I really had to be picky about what I was sending up here and what I was potentially leaving back home. So a lot of the stuff that I have up here now, I had to kind of build back into having. But yeah, the financial stress was a lot. I went for a couple months just kind of going off of my savings, which luckily I had a little bit of, but I did have to find a job almost like immediately after getting over here. And so it was the position at UCSF that I eventually got and was so thankful that I got because it provided some kind of income for me. But yeah, there is a lot of stress. I think a lot of students have to consider where they're living, if there's any costs that they can get a lower cost of living situation going on. But yeah, it was pretty difficult. I also didn't know too much about the Bay Area and cost of living. It's almost identical to living in Hawaii. So I moved to a similarly expensive place, which probably wasn't good on my part. But yeah, that was kind of eye-opening for me, was just how much it costs to live in the Bay Area, particularly if you're going to be like in the city, which was something I found that needed to happen. Originally, I was out in Alameda, but it was such a long commute for me to go back and forth between like where I was working, which is typically in the city, and going back home. So I moved quite a bit in the last few years, just trying to find better places with like better cost situations. Yeah, yeah. So that's also been, even as someone with a full-time job at this point, that's been pretty difficult.
Kim, I have kind of a cheesy question, but I'm really interested in what made the cut from Hawaii to here.
What made the
Like,
as far as what I brought up?
yeah.
What did I bring up here? I brought up, it was mostly clothes, I'm not gonna lie. But I had to buy, so I had like 2 pairs of jeans, guys, and I moved up here in the middle of December. And that was the worst idea ever. So I had to learn how to dress in the Bay Area. Um, what else did I bring? I brought like a couple blankets that my grandma had made for me. I brought up my skateboard that like, I don't know why I brought it in the first place, but it made its way up here. Yeah, and that was kind of it. It was mostly just like clothing. I had to figure out like the bed situation when I got here. Yeah, so that was, again, the planning was not in my favor, just doing this all on a whim. And I think had I planned better, the costs may not have been quite as substantial. I could have like checked out like Facebook Marketplace or like Craigslist or something like that for cheaper things. But I was in such an immediate need of like just basic stuff, right? Like shower stuff, and things like that when I moved up here, that I just kind of had to buy things at face value, whether it was at like Target or yeah, wherever I happened to go.
I kind of, and I don't have this in here, but I kind of, now I'm listening to your story, I want to know more about what it was like coming from Hawaii to Bay Area, because it's very different. I have family that lives in about like an hour away from Waikiki. And so, out there is the tourist area, right? It's like really fast fashion and like tourists, and it's all about like the money and stuff like that. And then they live about an hour away, and you can really tell the difference between people, the native people that live there and they've lived their whole life there, and then the tourist area and like kind of like what they're bringing in. It's very very different, and you can see the divide. And then also it's kind of like that in San Francisco as well, where you can see like downtown is kind of really fast fashion, glamorizing this life. And then when you get there you realize that it's actually not what you expected it to be. Did you kind of find that as well when you moved, or what was the vibes and what was different?
Yeah, for sure. That was living in San Francisco was so much different than visiting San Francisco. And I mean, I've grown to love it. I definitely love living here. But it was a huge shock, like just getting used to how I need to dress here in San Francisco. Layers are not a thing back in Hawaii. I can go, any day and probably a t-shirt and shorts and be totally fine. Don't need a jacket just in case. Don't need a windbreaker or umbrella just in case the weather changes. I learned about microclimates when I first moved here. So that was really interesting to learn about. But yeah, it was definitely when I went downtown for the first time, just how fast paced it was. I thought I had experienced that living on Oahu, and going to school there, but it's nothing like being here on the mainland and, experiencing the hustle and bustle that is San Francisco. And in the first year, I absolutely loved it. I was like, yes, I get to live this genuine city life here on the mainland. And then you kind of get tired. And I don't know if that's something that everyone experiences or if it's just because like I'm from Hawaii and every time I go home, people are like, slow down, you're walking too fast. But it's like living in this constant rapid fire pace is exhausting, which is so very different from the culture that I come from back home, where yeah, we walk a little slower. People really want to take their time when they see you, on the sidewalk, and they recognize you and they want to talk story. That may not necessarily be something that happens here in San Francisco. Like you see each other, it's a quick hi and you're off to whatever appointment or Zumba class or spin class that you have that you're trying to rush off to. So yeah, that was very different. And there's a huge population downtown, especially of there are definitely people who are in certain situations that are taking over, like what is that area called, the Tenderloin, that's just growing now. And that was an experience to see, because I think when I first visited San Francisco, I was seeing a lot of like the tourist sites, and that's not necessarily something that you encounter. But I think I see a lot of relation with that to Hawaii, because a lot of people see it as a paradise until they drive past certain places closer to like Aiea and like those places like Chinatown, and they realize that maybe it's not necessarily the superficial glamorous place that they thought, and there are actually hidden things that are happening in this paradise that we have. Yeah.
Yeah, I really do see a kind of a resemblance in Hawaii and then living in Bay Area, that glamorous type of idea of what it's like to live out there, and then the tourists and all that stuff, and then you actually get there, or you have family that live there, and they tell you the stories like, no, it's not. There's a divide of wealth. So yeah, I'm glad that you kind of like talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Also, opening the floor to anybody else. Does anybody else have any other questions or something they kind of want to know?
My question is about your twin. How often do you get to see them?
I usually get to go back home, luckily, about once a year. With the pandemic and everything, I haven't gotten to. But she's come up to visit me since I moved up here twice, I think. And then I get to go home and see her. So, yeah, we see each other quite a bit, at least once a year. And we're constantly texting. We'll FaceTime a lot. Yeah, it was more often when I first moved here, I think. That was definitely some separation anxiety and just this huge void almost that I had with having such a close sibling. Like we're basically best friends. My mom's always saying that we share a brain. We're stereos basically. We know what the other one's gonna say. So yeah, we see each other still pretty regularly, but I definitely miss her all the time still.
Kim, I'm gonna get corny with it again,
Yeah.
and I think this will be a good place to kind of maybe shift the conversation after this, but because I don't want to make it seem like it's only about Hawaii, because
Why
but
not?
oh, hey, I'm down for that too. But okay, I like to keep up with the trends. Okay, tell us that you're from Hawaii without telling us you're from Hawaii.
Oh man. Um oh, I don't know. uh I guess maybe the tattoo that's on my arm, but other than that, I'm trying to think, how would I let you know?
We can come back to it. We can come back to it
Yeah,
by the end of the
yeah. I
podcast.
know
Okay?
which one you're talking about, and I'm just like I had a blank. There are so many ways I think that I could tell you that I'm from Hawaii.
Okay, well, we'll sit on that one.
I know. I love Spam. Spam was it's part of the food pyramid. There you go.
Got it. Okay. So then what's your favorite Spam dish then?
Spam with bees, dude.
Yeah.
Yes. There's a whole Spam festival that happens on Oahu.
What?
And it's not even manufactured in Hawaii, dude.
Oh, it's
Isn't
not.
that crazy? No, it's not.
I assume that. But tell me more about this Spam festival. Like, I'm interested. What's going on there?
Yeah, there's a Spam throne that you can sit on. And it's all about Spam. It's just Spam cans everywhere. And I think it's called the Spam Jam, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yo,
So yeah.
I found a new life goal. Okay.
Yo, I see Brittany out there. She out there agreeing with you. I know Brittany
Yes.
spam masubi sometimes from quickly from on campus.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. I guess if there's no more questions, let's transition into kind of the next thing. And this is kind of getting into higher ed work and what you have come from undergrad. Did you work anything in undergrad? And now your master's, you're still doing your master's, correct? You're still in your master's program? Yes. Okay. Just wanted to make sure. So, from that journey of undergrad to your master's program, kind of going through some of the experiences that where you've worked in higher ed. So, how did you begin working in higher ed? And also, talking about the different jobs.
Sure. So yeah, I did start in higher ed during my undergraduate years. I worked as a Manoa peer advisor. So I basically got to do the work that I'm doing now, but as an undergraduate student. And I worked with UH Manoa's College of Business. So I worked primarily with their freshman and sophomore students, just like figuring out their prerequisites. But I also got to work with different like upper division students and their like study abroad experiences, things like that. But I think what I really got during that position was learning about different students and what they love, and that the major that they declare initially isn't always going to be what they want to pursue. I will never forget this one student who passionately wanted to become a math teacher. And as someone who's not that great at math, I would love to have a math teacher who's passionate and like wants to help students learn about math. But he was pressured by his parents to go into business. And we had that conversation, which I thought was, was really awesome that a student felt comfortable enough to tell me about what they really want to pursue, but also was kind of eye-opening, like, why shouldn't you pursue something that you love and you want to, that you're passionate about? So I think that's kind of where my love of advising started, right? Like, not pressuring students to go into something that they think will bring them money or they think will make other people happy, but really thinking about what they're passionate about and what they want to pursue, what they could see themselves doing for 10, 15, 20 years. Yeah. So that was where I first got started. And then I got a job after graduating as a financial aid counselor at a school that is no longer open in Hawaii. But that was my first real higher education job after undergraduate. And it was the first one that I could really get without a master's degree. But I will not, like, I love having that financial aid knowledge, but it was pretty stressful to be in financial aid, not gonna lie. And that was after I moved to the Bay Area. I continued as a financial aid counselor. I worked briefly as like in student accounts, so like for the bursar's office over at UCSF. Found my way back to financial aid when I went to Mills College and a smaller college after that. Found my way to financial aid at SF State. So I was in financial aid here at SF State for 2 years, and then I moved into being an academic advisor with EOPP.
Give us a little breakdown about what the difference was from working in financial aid versus working at EOP. Obviously, I mean, you kind of talked a little bit, stress levels probably a little bit different, but, just go into it and, anything you want to share.
Yeah, so the stress level is very different. I think the biggest difference that I notice with EOPP and financial aid is that with EOPP as an academic advisor, I get to stay with these students until they graduate. I learn so much about them, and it's really about that holistic experience, right? So I can help students find resources, whether it be CAPS, DPRC, the career services, any of those. Like I'm kind of like their resource to other resources, which is great. And with financial aid, it was very much just about the financial aid and getting that funding for them. And another thing is that with academic advising, there are so many options for students. They don't have to take all their classes here at SF State if they don't want to. They could take it at a CC and then come here. They could, do an associate's at a CC and then transfer here. There are a lot of ways to maneuver the academic requirements towards a student's degree. But with financial aid, a lot of it is federally or by the state or institutionally regulated. So there's not a lot of wiggle room. So it was a lot of hard no's. A lot of things are time sensitive. So if things, the March 2nd deadline, if things aren't submitted by then, it's just like you can't be as forgiving there as you can, I think, in academic advising. And that's been a huge difference, and probably one of the factors for the stress decrease is because I know there are options that students have with academics that they don't necessarily have with financial aid.
Be nice to y'all's financial aid people. I can't say that enough. I know that it's stressful when you're a student and you're trying to navigate this on your own financially. And I get that. I've been there. I've had to have my fair share of like financial aid troubles and stuff like that, especially because I'm an independent student. But never was I ever disrespectful to these people. Like they're just normal people trying to live their best lives out here. So be nice to your financial aid workers, and if they don't get back to you right away, follow up with them, but don't attack them. And just because one person tells you something doesn't mean the next person's going to say the same thing. So just be patient. But that's my piece on that.
Yeah, I would say I was thinking about like I never actually met anyone from financial aid when I went to undergrad. It was just like a window that you would drop off like your verification forms or someone would like enter your student number and then they'll kind of take care of it. The only one that I did meet somebody, it was like the scholarship coordinator. And they like took me to the back and it was like a weird experience to go through the cubicles and I was like, what? Because the window's so small, but there's this whole thing in the back. And that's the state, the one stop is kind of right there, but that's not where folks are at. They're upstairs and like you don't really get to see them, but they're answering like with the financial aid alias or whatever. But yeah, I would say treat your financial aid advisor kind of like people that handle your food, you just want to be nice to them just in case. You never, I mean, it's just like they're put under so much pressure, but we appreciate their work so much because they're really trying to get the best deal for y'all. Like whether you believe it or not, they're trying to maximize your award. But sometimes they're held back with like deadlines, and if you don't fill out your March 2nd by March 2nd, that's where the trouble starts.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just be nice to everybody. Just be nice.
That's a shirt right there. Be nice.
Okay, so getting into higher ed and stuff like that, is it the kind of field that you want to stay into, and also what do you plan to kind of transition into? Because I'm not sure if you want to stay an EOP advisor for as long as possible, or you want to try to transition to something else or another department in higher ed.
Yeah, I am really enjoying being an EOP advisor. So I could see me doing this, for at least another couple of years. I honestly don't know where I'm headed as far as professionally. Again, I just really enjoy being here with this particular department right now. It feels like at this point I've kind of come full circle. I was in trio program at UH Manoa and I didn't take advantage of it as I should have during my undergrad. But I love being able to help the students now in ways that I wish I had helped myself as an undergraduate. And I think that's what I really love about the work. So right now, I don't see too much movement as far as out of the EOP department. But yeah, we'll see.
Also kind of going over your overall experience and kind of talking about that, like the goods, the bads, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, just like in higher ed or like in my college experience?
In higher ed. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so it's been a really eye-opening experience, I think. There's a lot that I experienced during my own undergrad that I feel like I can bring to my advising position. And there are some things that, we wish we could change in the system, I'm sure. So I feel like that might be a fuel to maybe move into different positions later on, is like, how can I affect change that might benefit our students that I can't affect, like that I can't do here in an advising position. But overall, working in higher education has been awesome. I mean, there are definitely some very stressful moments, some moments where I know I have white hairs from having dealt with those situations, but I think that comes with every job. So, but in higher education, I've met so many awesome people. There have just been so many great connections, not just with like my colleagues, but with professors in my program. So yeah, it's been really awesome. Sometimes I question whether or not I chose the right field. And then, something like a student will reach out and say like, hey, thank you for being there during this one situation, or like, we're able to help a student out with financial aid issues. And I'm like, this is where I belong. And this is kind of where my heart's at. Yeah.
Do you have one piece of advice for someone like me? I really know that I want to go into higher ed after my undergrad. Do you have any piece of advice for somebody like me going into this field who's kind of fresh? I mean, I've had a little bit of experience, but even for people who have no experience and they're just kind of like, I want to try it out. Do you have any advice for these young professionals?
Yes. Remember what you love about higher education. Remember, because there are going to be so many instances where you might be dealing with a student, with parents, with colleagues, and it can jade you a lot, I think. And it took me a little while to remember why I'm here and why I love it. And it's for the students. It's because we could make a better higher education system, and that's what we're here for. To give students an experience that maybe we had ourselves, or maybe that we didn't have, and we want to provide for them. So, just if you have to write it on a piece of paper, on like a post-it or something, just to remind yourself, always remember why you got into it in the first place and why you love it.
Thank you. Okay. I'm also always opening the floor for anybody else. Does anybody else have any kind of questions, kind of thoughts on that?
Ooh, I got my defining moments question. Okay, you went to you were in Hawaii. You majored in English. What was that defining moment for you to decide? I think I'm gonna work in higher education now.
Yeah, it was. I think it was a mixture of things. When I was in undergrad, I went through a lot of stress. There was trying to take like 18 units my freshman year, and I think someone would have told me otherwise had I gone to see an academic advisor. There was like the working multiple jobs and burnout basically. So I had to take advantage of like Manoa's CAPS program and their like equivalent of DPRC, and going through all of that, but not having known about it as just a student. Like I had to be directed from one department to another, but not having known about it just by myself as a resource. And then being able to utilize my experience and the information I now had when I met with students, I think that was the turning point. It was like, hey, there are these resources that I know about because I had to go through this. You can take advantage of these too. And it was during those conversations where, students might also feel like, hey, I'm taking on a lot, I'm feeling overwhelmed, and kind of talking to them about my own experiences. But yeah, it was definitely during my Manoa peer advising days that I was like, this is it. This is kind of everything that I might want to do for however many years after this. Yeah.
I have a question for you, Kim.
Yeah.
So I know like you mentioned a lot like how you're able to tie in your own personal experience when you're like working with students. And I'm just curious, like, um, is there any challenges with the role that you're in higher ed? Like I know you talked a lot about like it's really rewarding, but have you ever hit like any challenges or barriers like in the role that you're in higher education?
Yeah, I think it's hard as an advisor because I want, especially because we're going to be with students for their entire 4 years or however long till they graduate. Um, it's hard to keep that professional line, I think, because definitely we've, you know, I've experienced some things during my undergrad, but I may not go into the depth of what I've experienced. And some students might feel very comfortable sharing what's going on at home, but I'm not equipped or professionally trained to go over their experiences. And being mandated reporters, there are some things that we do have to kind of stop the conversation and advise that they maybe go to CCAPS instead. Um, and yeah, it is also hard because there are things that maybe I've learned on the way that, again, I'm not professionally equipped to teach someone else to tell a student. So they do need to kind of seek out those resources and make an appointment on their own with someone else. And I think that's been kind of hard. It's just like drawing that line for both students and myself too, because I just want to like share and be like, no, you're not alone. But not oversharing, I think, has been something that I needed to learn, yeah, as an academic advisor.
All right, y'all. This is where we kind of move into the part where we talk about financial aid. And everyone dreads it. But you've had so much experience working in financial aid, Kim, and that's why I kind of wanted to bring you on because I feel like you're like the specialist, right? You always host workshops where you and Noah kind of talk about financial aid. loans? What's that like for students? What should students be aware of? Also talking about what's the different type of loans, right? So my first question for you, and it's kind of a long one, but what is something that you've seen students kind of drop the ball on in terms of financial aid? Or is there anything that's like a reoccurring issue amongst students?
Yeah, March 2nd deadline that I think we mentioned already in the podcast. Yeah, that's a huge one. Especially with transfer students, I think Noe and I have talked about this before, but there are waiver programs at community colleges that aren't utilized here at SF State because we're a university. So not knowing about that March 2nd deadline for transfer students is really difficult because when they get here, they don't have the same tuition grants that they might have had at a community college. But I think it's also difficult for students who, maybe first generation students who don't know that there is a deadline. So yeah, that may not necessarily be students dropping the ball, but it's a huge thing where we see, anything from March 3rd on just not getting the same amount of grants that they could have had they gotten it in by the March 2nd deadline. And then another one that is a recurring issue where it is students kind of dropping the ball is when a student waits until priority registration to turn in their verification documents. I've seen it a lot once it comes to like spring registration coming from the fall semester. The financial aid office will typically place verification documents the spring before. So for fall 2021, for example, this spring they will place the verification documents onto a student's student center. But if a student never logs on to their student center, if they ignore what's under their to-do list, they're not going to get awarded and they can't register for spring classes. Now, it does take time for a student to get their verification documents processed once they've submitted it. On a good, like if it's great, like everything's fine, maybe a week turnaround. If additional documents are needed, you're looking at anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks, depending how quickly you can get that information back to the financial aid office. So that's something where students want to enroll immediately, but it doesn't have an immediate turnaround. So students, they're thinking about ways that they could possibly get into classes, that maybe fill up quickly. If you're an upper division student trying to get into your major classes, having priority registration and being able to enroll on your date and time are vital. So if you have a campus financial obligation, if you have those verification documents, you're potentially not going to get into those classes. And unfortunately, there's nothing that the financial aid office can do to lift that campus financial obligation. The bursar's office will not lift it unless they see a financial aid award. So, you're just waiting and at that point watching the seats decrease in the class that you wanted. Yeah. So that's a huge one, I think, where students definitely, the ball is in their court, but they aren't taking, the necessary steps to get everything completed are those verification documents.
Yeah, and I kind of want to go a little bit more into depth about that. I was actually, I got placed on verification my freshman year, and I think it lasted until my junior year. But I remember being in high school, and I didn't know what that meant. Like, I didn't know what student verification meant. I didn't know the paperwork that came along with it. Like, where is it going? What is it for? Why are they asking me all these questions? And it was because my financial aid changed from being a dependent to independent, literally within like a month, I think, and that kind of flagged me as like, oh, why all of a sudden were you a dependent and now you're independent? And so my situation was a little bit unique because my mom actually had passed away my senior year, and so when I first filed my FAFSA, I was dependent, and then I think maybe a month after she had passed away, and so then I became an independent. And I had to change that because all my schools had to know, like, I really have no parents. I'm poor. I need help. And so then that got me flagged in the system. And so I had to send in, I think it was death certificates of both my dad and my mom. And then I had to also send in a non-tax filing form. And I had no idea what that was. And Kim, do you kind of want to mention a little bit about what a non-tax filing form is for folks?
Yeah. So usually you would have to send in, I think it's a form, no.
It's a 40T?
40, yeah, 45. 06T or something. But you're basically sending that to the IRS so they can send you a letter back saying they verify you did not file taxes for that particular tax year. And independent students, if you didn't work, if you didn't file taxes, you are required to get that letter from the IRS. It can't just be, I didn't work, I didn't file taxes, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of students actually have no idea what that is, and I didn't either. My first year, I was completely confused on how do I get this, who do I call, and so actually, if anybody out there's listening to this and they need that form, you actually just go on to the IRS website and you look up a non-tax filing form, and then you print it out, and then you fill it all out, and literally just read the directions, fill it all out, and then you mail it to the IRS, and you can fax it too, and all the information is on the bottom of the form. And then you wait about, I'd say like 3 weeks, low key. I think it low key took 3 weeks, and that was outside of a pandemic. I think I applied for it also again in the pandemic because for some reason I got verification my junior year again. I think, or no, coming into my senior year because I think I've been placed on verification every single year. And it literally took like 5 months for it to come in because I had applied for it right at the beginning of the pandemic, and then everything shut down. And then so I literally didn't get it until like 2 weeks ago, I think. But I worked with our financial aid office, and they said like as long as you write a handwritten letter and you sign it at the bottom, we'll take that. But that was in a pandemic, so now we're kind of coming out a little bit, and things are starting to open up, so they might still require that form. But I would say do not wait on that form because typically all the other paperwork is through the university. So you just print out that paperwork, you fill it out, and then you send it back to the financial aid department. But the other forms, like financial forms, like your tax forms or your non-tax filing form, those things, if you've lost them or if you need to get something from the IRS, it takes a long time. So just don't wait on it and really keep up with your student portal and make sure that there's no holds or alerts on there because it will really hinder you from being able to apply for classes. And then that sets graduation back. And me and Noah actually held our fast food drop-in hours yesterday, and we had students come in and kind of like last minute panicking about student verification or they didn't know how to do it, but it's like the day before it's due. And so I'm not gonna lie, it was me too. I had him look over my fast food because last minute I was just like, I'm stressed and I need you to do this for me. So I took advantage of that, but you really got to stay on top of that. So that's my piece, y'all.
Yo, not to go on a rant about equity and financial aid, but like, I think it's crazy that we're asking students to do this process and then hold the funds until you do it, right? Like, I remember a couple semesters, I was on a full ride scholarship, so I was definitely privileged, but I felt, this is just me, right? I felt like, are they doing it because I have a full ride scholarship? Like, it felt that way because I'm like, every year? How is it every year? You said it was random. And every year I had my mom and dad like sign each page of the tax transcript. I don't know if that's still a thing or not. But they made me sign every single page, put it in a folder, put it in the box, wait for it to process. And so there was 2 semesters I remember not doing the verification and like waiting a month, 2 months to get my disbursement. I had to borrow from my friend's disbursement. I know that's something like people end up having to do. Like, I'm a good for the money. I'm just waiting on my financial aid. That becomes like a phenomenon, right? Like students letting students borrow their financial aid money. And so I wish that there was like another way, an easier way. But right now, all we can do is help students like go check your student account to make sure everything on your to-do list is taken care of. Actually read what it says because we see it and then we don't look at it. You got to click on more details. And so that really is like just part of the student job to go onto your student center here and there to look if there's anything on your to-do list. And also like you're probably getting emails about it. And that's another thing to talk about, the amount of emails and the spam emails and all that stuff. But like high key, your job as a student is to check your emails and filter them, go on your student center, and hoping that we can get folks more used to that in these next coming, like, in this cycle at least of incoming students.
Yeah, and also to scroll all the way to the bottom because a lot of times I've had students come in and then they'll be like, I don't see the form. And then I'm like, okay, let's go onto your student portal. And then they click on the thing and then I like scroll down and they're like, oh, I just read the little blurb right here. Like, no, literally scroll down all the way on the page because typically the links are at the bottom. So yeah, just that too. Okay, and okay, now also going into the part of, do you have any tips or tricks in terms of financial aid and also scholarships?
Yeah, I would say for financial aid, just don't procrastinate if you're able to, right? So I say if you're able to because some situations, like if your parent hasn't filed the taxes for the year that's required, you can't on October 1st submit your FAFSA or your California Dream Act. But if your parents have, submitted their taxes, if you do have the information to complete the application, do it as soon as possible. Same goes for your verification documents. Open that up, see what they require, because like you were saying, Yasmin, like those documents from the IRS take forever. And sometimes the requested documents don't even come in. You have to submit a request for a second time. So as far as like initial submission of applications, just do it as soon as possible, because a lot of those March 2nd deadline funding, those are going to be the grants that you want, the free money you don't have to pay back. And for scholarships, just apply. You don't know if you're the only person applying to that scholarship. And with Academic Works, you can fill out the general application and see a list of scholarships that could apply to you. And as far as the scholarship process, if you have a personal statement that you've written for one scholarship, save it, and just use it, copy and paste it to other scholarships. If you have a resume, save it, like start creating a master resume and just kind of tweak it as needed for the scholarship that you're applying to. Basically, save any master document that you've made for scholarships because every scholarship's going to ask pretty much the same questions. If you look at the EOPP scholarships, we ask the same questions on both of them for undergraduate students. So you could basically copy and paste what you've said. And that goes for a lot of scholarships that you might find institutionally. Um, and you can also check the external scholarships. So for institutional scholarships, there are certain criteria that we're not allowed to utilize in the institutional ones, but outside organizations can utilize it. So definitely check out like your county, like different organizations that you might be a part of. Sometimes they do it based on ethnic background. So you can search that in the external organizations and scholarships that you can't internally based on the SF State institutional scholarships. So definitely take a look. It doesn't have to be every day that you're looking at the scholarships, but I would say monthly, bi-weekly, just check it out because they're updating it. New scholarships might appear that weren't there previously. So just take advantage of the free money that might not be going to anyone. Yeah.
Also talking about the difference between, and just briefly, but the difference between scholarships, grants, and loans.
Yeah, so grants and scholarships are typically, the ones that you want. That's the free money you don't have to pay back. Um, the grants are usually going to be like for FAFSA students, that it's the federal Pell Grant, SEOG grant for students who are submitting either the FAFSA or the Dream Act. It would be like the California, the Cal Grant, sorry. So the grants are usually from like federal and state funding. Scholarships are going to be from like an institution, whether or not it be your educational institution, an external organization. But again, it's just going to be the free money that you can utilize for educational costs, typically tuition and fees, books and supplies, things like that. So that's the money that you want, the funding that everyone is looking for because they don't have to pay it back. With loans, you do have to pay it back eventually. There is a difference between the subsidized loan and the unsubsidized loan. For emergency situations where you might need additional money and you need to take out a loan, typically the financial aid office will suggest taking out the subsidized loan first because it will not accrue interest while you're in school. And you do have a 6-month grace period after you graduate as well. The unsubsidized loan will start accruing interest as soon as you borrow it. So the principal balance that you borrow is just going to keep increasing. So by the time you graduate, you might have a bigger balance to pay off than what you originally borrowed.
Yeah, and I think a lot of when I was doing my loan stuff, I think they make you do like a loan. What is it like an
Yeah,
introduction to loan?
yeah.
I can't remember what it's called. There's like a
You
specific.
have an entrance counseling. Yeah. So it goes over the basics of like the differences, and then like you need to go over budgeting and things like that. And then you also have the master promissory note that asks for references. Yeah, those are the people they will contact if ever you stop making payments on your loans.
Yeah, it's no joke, y'all. It's really
Yeah.
and I also think even me, I took out. I think I have like 9,000 worth of loans, just to be transparent with everybody. But I think I took out like I think it's 9,500. I think, but just from I'm in my fourth year now, graduating. But from over these 4 years, I think like my interest grew like a little under $400. And so I was like, $400, like that's crazy. And it's like low key, it's nothing, but it is something, like from 4 years. That was low key like almost $100 a year of just interest. And I was shocked by it when I went on the other day. I went on to my financial page to look at my financial aid page to look at my loans and stuff, because I'm like, dang, I haven't looked at these in a minute. And so I go on there and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I already owe almost $400 in interest. And so just making students aware that like if you do get a unsubsidized loan, right? Unsubsidized loan, they accrue interest.
Mhm. Yeah.
And keeping up on that and making sure that you know that. But yeah, it was pretty shocking to me. So
Yeah, and I think just because there are also alternative loans that students can borrow. If you have the ability to borrow the federal loans first, I would probably suggest that because of the fixed interest rates that they have. Alternative loans, they vary, so you don't really know what interest you're going to be charged at any point. And then for students who submit the California Dream Act, there is a California Dream Loan that you can place yourself on the waiting list for. So alternative loans do not have to be the first loan that you go for. Definitely contact the financial aid office to see if there's still California Dream Loan eligibility for the academic year.
Kim, did you also mention what a Parent Plus loan is?
Parent Plus loans. So that's what I used to process when I was in financial aid. So this is the additional loan that your parent can take out for you if they want to help with your educational costs. It's based on your parents' I don't want to say their credit eligibility, but it's more so looking at like whether or not your parents are in good financial standing. So if at any point your parents have like defaulted on a loan or applied for bankruptcy or anything like that, they may not be eligible. But if they are in good financial standing, they can take up to your cost of attendance an additional loan for you. But it is an unsubsidized loan, so they will accrue interest as soon as they've borrowed it. If the parent is denied, then the student gets additional unsubsidized loan. So it's if the parent's denied, it's not the end all, but the student is getting the lesser of the two loans. Yeah.
And also clarifying too that the Parent Plus loan is for dependent students. So if you're independent, you won't get offered a Parent Plus loan. So yeah, just putting that out there too. All right, y'all. I feel like we covered so much in financial aid. Is there anything else? No, I know sometimes you have some things because you know a little bit about financial aid and all that stuff too. So I'm not sure if you have anything you want to share.
Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna read like the dummy's guide to like financial aid because the one experience that I always remember is a parent and a student talking to me about whether or not they should take out the Parent Plus loan, which would determine whether or not the student stayed on campus. And I was like, that's not my like. I can tell you the benefits of staying on campus versus coming home from commuting from home, but the decision is between y'all because like the truth is you're gonna have to start paying that loan since, right away, the interest rate is a little bit different and it's under the parent's name. So, that's a conversation, probably one of the first real hard conversations to have with your parents is like, Mom and Dad, will you put your name on this dotted line to allow me to stay on campus or to attempt to have a good college experience? My recommendation has changed over the time, right? To how I approach this. And I think now it's like towards the parents' rights to know certain information, because like it could be an understanding. Like, I'm down to put this money if you're down to show me that you're doing well in school. Like, not even the grades, but just like show me something. Because that was my downfall. Like, I did not show my parents anything, or I didn't talk to them about anything I was doing, and they felt left out of the loop. And there was times where even though I got a scholarship, I had no money left, and I didn't want to like bother my parents with the money situation. So I would borrow from like other folks. But if I had just like kept them in the loop, I'm like, hey mom, can I borrow $200, like $300? So I just think now that there's a way to involve your parents sometimes. But if you don't want to have that connection at all, then be careful about taking out the Parent Plus loan, because they're gonna ask. They're gonna ask you like, hey, well, how's my investment doing? Right? Like, you're an investment now because they're putting the money for you. So it's just one of those issues that it's, even as a professional, it's hard to be the middle person for that, because I don't know the family like that. I don't know their dynamics with money, and it's a decision that they have to make on their own, and then go from there.
Yeah, I've even had friends who have had their parents take out the Parent Plus loan, but then the parents like, but you're gonna pay me back because this is money that I'm like letting you have, but really just until you finish, at school, and then I expect you to pay me back. Um, so also being prepared for that situation, if you know that you need money and you're gonna ask your parents, they could also take it back and be like, we're not in the best financial situation to do that, and so you are going to have to pay us back once you graduate, or even in payments during your time in your undergrad. So yeah, and also too, me and Cynthia just found out that when you apply to your master's program, you're considered an independent, and we didn't know that.
I had no idea. I was panicking. I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, once you hit any post-bac program, I believe. Yeah, so master's, doctorate, you'll be an independent student no matter what your age or marital status or any of the other exceptions that you would have needed. Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea. And I was like, did I press a button or something? Like, what? I had to like keep going to the beginning. I was like, what's going on? Until I looked it up, and like it gave me like what questions lead you to be an independent
Yeah.
or be
Yeah.
considered an independent student.
Yeah,
Ooh, that's a good question. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The question, I guess I still don't fully understand, because I know like I'm also attending USC, and like, I'm hopefully in the last phase of it, and like I don't have to, but I am borrowing to pay tuition, and I hate it so much. But like, what is for the Cal States or the public schools, like what's the amounts that they actually offer? Because for me, it's only loans. But are there grants for grad school?
I believe at SF State, there's the state university grant if you qualify. And so you have to still be under the same expected family contribution threshold as they would for undergraduate students, which is a little, it's a little more difficult for graduate students because a lot of them are working. So you're going to have a higher expected family contribution. So at SF State, I believe they give the state university grant, but at most institutions, I don't believe grant eligibility happens too often for graduate students. Yeah, unfortunately, I know. It's all unsubsidized loans. Sorry, guys.
No, yeah, I was like looking into that too, and I'm applying to Fullerton's master's program, and they have like small grants, I think, but mostly it only covers like half of your tuition, so you're expected to pay like the other half out of your own pocket. But also too, they have a lot of scholarships to apply to for your master's, so look into that too. If you're not getting the financial your financial needs covered all the way, just look into scholarship and see what they kind of offer, and also programs on campus, because sometimes like programs and organizations on campus have money that they either get from the government or they fundraise or kind of things like that. And they understand that grad students need those scholarship awards, and so just apply to them, see what you can find on campus. All right, y'all. I guess we're getting into the closing now. I always open this space for anybody to kind of ask last minute questions, literally about anything, or kind of share anything they are thinking of. We usually take a minute, and then we kind of think of things, and then somebody will unmute themselves. But I gotta think of something. I usually have something. Does anybody else have anything?
I have a story of how I met Kim. So the year was 2018, I think. And we were both contacted to serve as test administrators, was it? Like for the UC written exam or something?
Yeah, we were test proctors.
That's right, proctors. My first time, I was like scared, and then it was like at what's the name of the high school across the street from SF State?
Is it Lowell?
Lowell, yeah, Lowell. So I'm like exploring Lowell, like what the heck? And then it was like in the library, and it was like a group that seemed really familiar with each other, and I was like, oh. Anyway, Kim is introduced to me by another acquaintance of ours. And I don't know, I honestly felt like something was like, I feel like, does she know me? Like, or it was just like a real cool connection. And she's just, I didn't know she was applying to EOP or anything. And then, when I heard the news, I'm like, what? Like, that's crazy. And I feel like we've hit it off ever since, it's just one of those things that happen. Like, I really believe in like destiny, y'all. I hate to get corny again, but like, I do feel like y'all, everybody in this group, like it was destined to be because we connect so well, and there's never like a dull moment. And then at some point we connected about like one of our favorite shows, The Good Place, and like it's been history since, y'all. I've been pitching to her all these show ideas that never will see the light of day, but it's always a good time with Kim. And like I think that's at the end of it all, like that's what makes her a great advisor and person to talk to, is like, that she can communicate well and like is very, very just approachable. And even when she presents the dry material of financial aid, the way she delivers it, that's what makes it magical. And I think I really appreciate and admire her for that. So thank you, Kim.
Oh, thanks, Noe. I think that was right after I got hired. And I think our mutual friend was like, yeah, Noe works in EOP. And we just kind of started talking about that. And then, yeah, you were my first EOP friend before I even got into the office.
No, yeah. And I think, at least from my experience, when I first started working at EOP in 2018 as well, I didn't know anybody. I feel like SF State is kind of, and this is something I will say all the time, but it's so spread out and like no department talks to each other. And so I was working in residential life, and then I came to EOP. I met Noe, and then we kind of just got started right away. But we didn't really have like a staff introduction. Like we were never really kind of, here's the advisors, here are these people at EOP. We kind of just got right into it. And so I was like, oh, I don't really know anybody. Like none of the advisors talked to us. My advisor at the time was Danny, and then Danny actually moved on. So then I got moved to Jesus. Hadn't even met Jesus yet. I didn't know anybody at EOP. I didn't even know like my own coworkers. We were just kind of all just got thrown in together. And then I remember Kim and Julia both kind of started coming to our events. And then, I said hi to Kim, and we kind of got talking, and I was like, man, these two are cool. Like, I want to be friends with them. And then, they both kind of just started coming to our events and really supporting us, and being two people that like, if we ever had any questions, they would always be like, here's what I know about this. And then I found out that Kim knew about financial aid, and I'm like, okay, like, and I started to kind of like connect with you a little bit. And then I think it was really that point where you went to Alcatraz with us. We went in a group, and we kind of had a moment where we were kind of just talking about things, and I was like, wow, there's like so many things in your life that like I can kind of relate to. And we kind of just were talking about like Hawaii and how you're from there. And then I was saying like I have family out there. And it's just a good vibe, y'all. And ever since then, I was kind of just like, nah, Kim's a good person, and like genuinely wants to help students and connect with students, and also really cared about the mentor program, because I kind of felt like staff wasn't really reaching out to us in a way, but you and Julia always showed up to everything, and always really, just wanted to be involved, and really help us out. And so that's also kind of why, I wanted to bring you on, not only because, you've supported us, but just because you're such a good person and you're so knowledgeable and you really truly want to help students. And so that's why I, wanted you to come on and be a part of this podcast.
Oh, thanks, Yasmin. And I think, yeah, it was really awesome, especially after like going to all the mentor events and getting to know you all, and even like summer bridge. But going to Alcatraz was really awesome with everyone. I think we really connected, finding out about Hawaii and Okinawa and being Okinawan. So that was really awesome. Yeah.
All right, y'all. Cynthia, Brittany, do y'all have anything? Good to go?
I just want to say thanks for hopping on with us, Kim. Like, I learned so much about you in this podcast, and I just want to say, like, thanks for, sharing your personal experience and also, like, advice for folks who are listening on this podcast. I feel like a lot of folks will, like, benefit from a lot of your enriched experience.
Yeah.
Thanks y'all for having me. I really appreciate being able to tell my story. I think it's the first time that I've ever thought about it all at once, and how it's kind of brought me here to being an EOP and an advisor and getting to meet all of you. So this has been really awesome. Thank you.
No, yeah, definitely, Kim. Thank you so much for coming on and being brave and sharing your story. Because I get, like, being on Zoom, it's not easy. And oftentimes sharing your story with people that, we know each other, but we don't know each other like that. And so coming on and giving us your story and also sharing it to people, all the way out there, because, this podcast is broadcasted to everybody. And so it's super brave of you to, come on and, share your story and be a part of this and making history here at EOP, because that's what really this is all about. So again, thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, okay, so getting in store, what's in store for next week? Honestly, y'all, it's gonna be a mystery podcast. There's some things in the works that we're kind of working out with other people to come on, and also some topics that we kind of want to get into. So we're still trying to get Steph on to talk about housing and housing crisis in SF, and also give some housing resources for students, and also talk about the program paths. So we're trying to get Steph on, but if Steph isn't able to make it for next week, I think I kind of want to put my team on the spot and really talk about what it was like with their stress in higher ed, what their anxiety was in higher ed, and how they kind of dealt with that. Because I think it's really important for students to know that everyone, whether you work in higher ed, whether you've been in undergrad, your master's, your PhD, at some point in your journey, you kind of just feel drained, and you have to kind of deal with that anxiety and kind of push through in order to, graduate and eventually move on, right? And so just highlighting that. So I think, it's going to be a mystery podcast, but, tune in next week for episode 5, y'all. Can you believe that we're on episode 5 already? I feel like we just started. But yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing y'all next week and continuing this conversation about higher ed journeys, and everything that we experience. So again, thank you, Kim, for coming on, and we will see y'all next week. Bye, y'all.